मिलाइण वारा आहियूं हिकिड़ी शख़्सियत सां जिन जो नालो आहे ज़ुल्फ़िकार अली भुट्टो जूनियर। वेलकम। असां तव्हांखे लतीफ़ा जे प्लेटफॉर्म ते भली कार चऊं था। ज़ुल्फ़िकार अली भुट्टो साहब हूअं त पंहिंजे तारुफ़ खे जेको हो पंहिंजी शख़्सियत जे बारे में तव्हां सां ॻाल्हि ॿोल कंदा, बट मां कुझु लफ़्ज़ चवंदी हलां त हुननि जी जेका शख़्सियत आहे उहा आर्ट सां वाबस्तु आहे। ही कॉल्स हिमसेल्फ एन आर्टिस्ट। सो उन आर्टिस्ट जी नज़र सां दुनिया खे ॾिसणु कीअं हूंदो आहे एंड आर्ट कहिड़े तरीक़े सां तव्हांखे मुख़्तलिफ़ शयुनि जी तरफ़ सेंसिटाइज़ करे सघे थो, हुननि जी पंहिंजी ज़ाती वाबस्तगी आर्ट सां कीअं थींदी, त अॼु असांजी ॻाल्हि ॿोल हलंदी इन्हनि सवालनि ते। We'll be conversing today about, a life through an artist lens. So how life appears to the common folks and how as an artist you feel it yourself, your personal feel. So if you want to let our audience know about your journey with art.
बिल्कुल बेशक। तो मैं एक्चुअली अपने आप को समझता हूँ कि मैं कारीगर हूँ। आर्टिस्ट जो 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 लफ्ज़ है मैं वो भी मानता हूँ, मगर मैं इसलिए अपने आप को कारीगर समझता हूँ क्योंकि मैं ज़्यादातर फैब्रिक के साथ काम करता हूँ। आई एम पाण कम कयां थो, चाहे वो कढ़ाई का काम है या बीडिंग का काम है या डाइंग का काम है या प्रिंटिंग का काम है, मैं सब खुद ही करता हूँ। और इसी जो हमारी सोसाइटी में लोगों की आदत नहीं है, वो समझते हैं कि जो लेबर है, वो समझते हैं कि ये लेबर है, ये मजदूरी है।
That's related with manual work.
Manual work, women's work, right? तो वो कभी वो समझ नहीं सकते कि मैं खुद करता हूँ, वो हमेशा कहते हैं कि आप किसी से करवाते होंगे। So I say, that I say that it's my passion, it's my love. तो मैं ज़्यादातर फैब्रिक के साथ काम करता हूँ और मेरी कुछ तारीख भी है थिएटर के साथ। माजी में मैंने काफ़ी थिएटर किया था, especially in the US. And
how you envision art? How do you feel that art can contribute a new lens to look at the world, maybe, from an artist's perspective?
Yeah. I think art is it's perception, it's communication. Art एक किस्म का कम्युनिकेशन है पब्लिक के साथ, आवाम के साथ, लोगों के साथ। और इसी के हवाले से आई थिंक इट हैज़ अ ग्रेट प्लेस इन आवर सोसाइटी। मगर आर्ट में भी कैपिटलिज्म की बीमारी भी है। और एंड दिस इज़ माई इशू with the arts, especially जो गैलरी की आर्ट्स होती है, कराची की गैलरियाँ जो होती है, क्लिफ्टन वाली गैलरियाँ या आर्ट फेयर्स, बियनालेस वगैरह, ये कैपिटलिज्म का एक हिस्सा है। But then we have the other different kinds of art forms, like the one that you are involved in, the theater arts. This has a huge potential because you are literally communicating with the public something that you feel is important. So in this sense, art is a form of communication. We're all artists. हम सब फनकार हैं, हम सब artists हैं. Art बनना हमारा हक भी बनता है, right? As human beings. So, but if you're an artist, meaning you're showing the world your art, meaning you're communicating to the world your art. So, of course, art can help us imagine a new world order, of course.
And I could, read somewhere about you that, you are a visual artist. So you tend to realize, that artistic sensibility through somehow visuals, the visuals that you can show to the world, or maybe you can show to yourself what you are feeling inside. So how would you elaborate on this point?
So, You know, I think और हमने इसके बारे में पहले भी बात की कि मैं अपने आप को आर्टिस्ट नहीं समझता हूँ, मैं अपने आप को कारीगर समझता हूँ क्योंकि मैं ज़्यादातर फैब्रिक के साथ काम करता हूँ, मैं खुद अपने एम्ब्रॉयडरी करता हूँ, मैं खुद अपने सीक्वेंसिंग करता हूँ, बीडिंग करता हूँ, प्रिंटिंग करता हूँ, जो भी मैं करता हूँ मैं खुद करता हूँ. And I think this is part of removing art from the classist space. Because especially in the art world, those who are able to make are people usually with generational wealth, right? Of course, I can be included in this list, but this is something that we also have to challenge, right? Why is it that the artist is the one who shows and who gets all the fame and the praise, but they're never, but sometimes they're not even the person making the work. So I think for me, visual art is important because we must recognize it as a form of labor, right? We need to see art also as a mazduri, right? It's not separate from labor. It's not separate from the world that we live in. For example, the greatest artists of Sindh are the unnamed women who make huge tapestries and rillis and embroidery pieces जो के 500 रुपए के लिए बिकते हैं. क्यों? I mean, I can make the same thing. Even worse, I won't make the same quality. I'll make a worse quality, but I can raise my price as high as I want. Why? Why does it become my right? There's people on the street in Karachi, women who make जो basket बनाते हैं कढ़ाई से या अपना ऊन से बनाते हैं. और अगर आप उनसे खरीदेंगे एक अपना जो बास्केट, वो आपसे 200 रुपए ले लेंगे. क्यों 200 रुपए ले लेंगे? The worth is so much, but we separate art from labor, right? Yes. But I think, you know, if we want to make art part of a socialist mind or part of a leftist mantra, then we also have to constitute it as a type of labor. It's a beautiful labor. It's a honorable labor, but it's also labor. And all labor is honorable.
I think we come closer to that Marx's definition that it must, you know, align yourself with the world rather than dissociate it.
Yes.
You know, one must feel and realize oneself through one's art.
Yes.
So it must be a medium of that realization that you own it and it owns you back.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Okay,
definitely.
I would like to ask something about, you know, what you think, you know, how art has been throughout history, and specifically if we associate it with the theatre. So how you look at, you know, their historical progress.
So, you know, theatre is something, it's been a side passion of mine. अगर हम बड़े सगीर as an example ले लेंगे. So we have several different types of theatre. Qawwali is also theatre. क्योंकि आप किस्सा सुना रहे हैं.
Okay.
राग भी एक किस्म का थिएटर है, कवाली भी एक किस्म का थिएटर है, कीर्तन भी एक किस्म का थिएटर है. और and it's always been used to bring out a sense of passion. When you see when a qawwali is sung, right, and if Bulle Shah says मस्जिद ढा दें, मंदिर ढा दें, मतलब मस्जिद गिरा दें, मंदिर गिरा दें, मगर जो भी मगर आपके दिल ना गिरा दे, right? This brings out passion, right? So theater is a form of, for me, it's a form of ecstasy. It's a form of communal ecstasy, right? You're supposed to bring about a feeling from your audience, right? You're supposed to seduce your audience. So I think theater should be seductive, and I don't use the word seductive in a vulgar way. I mean seductive in a way that you're bringing people towards you. So I think if we use these examples as theater, then the concept of theater does not feel Western anymore. It doesn't feel like it comes from another place. It's within our own cultural
True enough.
understanding. Even a majlis is theater, because you're telling the story of the majlis, especially that happens on Ashura. You're telling the story of you're talking about a tragedy. You're bringing about a sense of grief in your audience, right? So theater is a part of our blood as South Asians.
So how would you see, like, okay, yeah, this is a universal feel as we talking about, you know, to the motivation to express oneself in whatever forms are available. What is your culture like, you know, being very indigenous to the roots. But then there are some differences as well, like we associate it with Greek, you know, and with West. So what like other cultural nuances and meanings does it get when it comes to us? Like here, if we talk about subcontinent, Pakistan, or even specifically Sindh, so what form of change do you see?
So I think we still need to unlock its potential. I saw a great theater program at an event in Nasirabad,
Okay.
your theater, as well as there was one play that was done on the River Indus.
Yeah.
And the dams on the River Indus, and it was against the dams on the River Indus, and it was about greed. And I think, you know, people understood. People were drawn in. There was, you know, the device of dance was used, the device of music was used, the device of poetry was used. So I think, you know, when we think about cultural nuances, we can bring Sindhi cultural nuances, or we can bring Saraiki cultural nuances, or Baloch cultural nuances, or whatever specificities there are, through language, through poetry, through music, through costume, through the story itself. The story itself is a nuance.
Yes.
Right? So you can't, I mean, in the same way, so many Shakespearean plays have been adapted. Romeo and Juliet becomes Leela Ram. Macbeth becomes Maqbool. You know, there are so many Hindi films that have adapted Shakespearean plays, and that's the thing. There are archetypes of stories, right? We have an archetype of injustice. We have an archetype of the oppressor. We have an archetype of love. We have an archetype of jealousy. We have an archetype of the savior. So all these things are, I mean, I don't like using this word, but in the sense we can all relate to these archetypes, right? These figures. So the nuance comes, like I said, in the language, the content, the costuming, and we need to bring theater more out into the public. It shouldn't be this thing where the doors are closed and you have a ticketed audience. I mean, everyone should have a right to experience a story.
Okay, you previously told us that you have been working with one of the theater groups or maybe theater companies. So would you like to share your experience there, like what you worked for? And
so I had the fortune of, when I lived in the US, I lived in the US for about 6 years. And 2 of those 6 years, I worked in a theater company called Anne Blumenthal and Dancers, run by Anne. In fact, the company is still around. And we worked with the homeless community, the houseless community in San Francisco.
That's great.
Yeah. And we helped them develop their own poetry, their own pieces that they wanted to make, their own music even.
That makes cultivating it.
We cultivated it. And our director, Anne, her speciality was in using what she called vernacular movement, meaning everyday movements becoming dance.
Okay.
So she made dance accessible. Dance wasn't ballet where you go, you know, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, you know, where you have to count and think and like, is my hand here? So she would say, okay, what expression do you have when you're angry, right? And they would say, well, this. So she'd make this into a dance move. This would become a dance move, and we'd repeat it, you know, over and over. So in this sense, it made theater very accessible, very communal. And I have to say, it wasn't easy.
Of course.
It wasn't
Yeah.
easy because it's when people are told that they don't have a right to imagine,
Exactly. Yes.
then they won't instinctively